Good afternoon. I'm Cheryl Gay. I am a two-time heart kidney recipient, and I'm honored to share my story with you. On my 38th birthday, my friend and I were going shopping, but I woke up with chest pains. But after we got the kids to school, I said, I'm not going to let a little chest pain stop me from going shopping. So we went on to Augusta, but the first store we went in, I could not walk anymore. The pain was so bad. So I called my doctor, who he happened to be out of town, and I had to go to someone on call. Went to that office and they did an EKG, and they came in and did a second EKG. And then the doctor came in and said, Cheryl, I don't think it's your heart. I think you have anxiety. Don't you have three children? I said, yes. And he said, I wouldn't worry about this. I'll give you something for the inflammation and you'll be fine. And if you don't feel better Monday, come see your doc. I said, okay. It didn't get any better. And Sunday in church, I couldn't get any air in at all. So they went up to the sound room, got my husband down, and he took me immediately to the emergency room. And I was in severe congestive heart failure. They called in a lung doctor, they called in the heart doctor, and they had to determine which was the cause of the problem. And it was very soon obvious that it was my heart. I had an echo done, and my heart was already 2 times the normal size and was only pumping at the 20% ejection fraction. So we put me on lots of medicine and sent me home after a week to go to bed for a year. And I was not just to get up, I could sit in a chair, but I could not do anything for a year. I said, this is going to be pretty nice being Miss Queen Bee. So my mama came one day and my mother-in-law came the next day, and I was just a big baby. They took care of me. It's nothing like having your mother-in-law to help you shower. But she loved me, and so we got through all that. But anyway, 3 weeks after I was diagnosed, I told my husband to please go to work on time. Your mother would be here in 30 minutes after the kids left. And so I was sitting at the breakfast table with my youngest. My kids were 14, 15, and 10. So Tracy and I were sitting here, and I have no memory of even that day. But she said, I told her to call your daddy. I don't feel well. And I fell out of my chair and onto the kitchen floor. And she called her sister, called 911, and called Tony back home. And my son ran out to greet the ambulance. And when the ambulance got here, I'd already taken my last breath, and the children were sitting here crying. So they got the kids away from me and started CPR, shocked me 5 times with the defibrillator. Got a weak heartbeat. I died again on the way to the hospital, and they've got me back again and got me straight into the unit. And the doctor came out and told my family I'd been down for over 30 minutes, which meant I was probably going to be severely brain damaged. And if I did live, I only had a 5% chance of living. Well, everybody gathered that we know, plus people, strangers, started praying for me. And within a few hours, I was off the vent. I was talking. I had some short-term memory loss due to the medications they gave me. But my kids are going to tell you today, I'm still brain damaged. But, we can get by that too. So they moved me to another hospital, and I became the 13th person in Augusta to get my own implanted defibrillator. And it worked just like the ones with the paddles on the outside, except it was implanted. And so it would pick up that my heart was messing up before I knew it. And it would shock you like a mule kicking you in the chest. And at that time, it was the size of your hand, and they put it in your abdomen. And over the next 7 years, I had 3 more, and each time they got a little smaller. And today, they're probably about the size of a 50-cent piece. So technology has really improved that. But it saved my life when it did shock me. And so I maxed out on all the medicine by this time. And my doctor here in Augusta told me that it was time to think about listing for transplant. So we made the appointment, and I went to Emory and got the best physical I'd ever had in my life, because you have to be sick enough to list, but you can't be too sick to list. Well, I found out that I passed all the tests, and they gave me a beeper back then, because this was in 1994 when I got sick, 2002 when I was trying to be enlisted for transplant. The first weekend I had the beeper, it went off after church on Sunday, and I handed it to Tony because I knew it was an Emory number. It had that 712 number. Well, Tony called it back. It wasn't for us. It was a janitor calling for his boss, and he'd called the wrong number. So we had a first fright, defibrillator, from the beeper going off. So a few weeks later, my blood pressure really was dropping and having trouble. So the doctors decided I was going to have to be admitted and waiting in the hospital. 3 weeks later, my little girl, my 10-year-old, was now starting college. And so my husband had come home to help her get packed and everything that he needed to do for her. And when he got back to the hospital that night, he was tired. My sister was with him. She was tired. I said, y'all go on to the hotel. I'm fine because Emerald's coming on. And I had lost my taste buds. Nothing tasted good. But I was going to watch Emerald. And as he went bam, bam with all his spices, I just knew it was going to make me feel better. So they left. And not 5 minutes after they left, the nurse came into my room and she said, Cheryl, your heart is on the way. That's what she called it. It wasn't a heart. It wasn't your donor heart. She had claimed it for me. So she said, we got to get busy. We got a lot to do. I said, not till I call my husband back. So I got on the phone and called him. He had not even gotten into the hotel room. And so he got my sister back out and they came back. By the time, we had some of them rode up in the airplane. Some of them just drove. So by, 2 or 3 hours later, we had the whole family in the room with me. And I had done what I had to get done. And we were celebrating my life to be, because I knew I was either going to be I was in a win-win situation. I was either going to have a new heart and feel good for the first time in 8 years, or I was going to have a new heart and a whole new body, if I died and went to heaven. So we sang hymns. We had prayer for the donor family. We remembered all of our good times we'd all had together, because we don't have in-laws in my family. It's just one big family, because my mother and daddy and Tony's mother and daddy were friends. We all went to the same church. That's how we all met. So we always celebrated holidays together, and just one big family. And it was just wonderful to have that support. And so I didn't even think about, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and we're being kind of loud. So when they came to get me, I saw one man looking out the window at me at his door, waving at me. And I said, oh, I'm sorry we kept you awake. He said, no, honey, I was partying with you. So that's what it is, because the heart recipients become family. And it's like, one big party when somebody gets that gift of life. So we go down to the operating room. And all I remember is they laid me out and put my hands straight out like this. And I said, I wonder if this is what Jesus felt like on the cross. And then I was put to sleep. The surgery was only 4 hours long to take out a heart that was the size of a football. I was off the vent that afternoon. I was sitting in a chair the next day, walking down the hall the next day, discharged in a week, and walking a mile in 3 weeks. I felt wonderful. And so the one funny thing, here in Georgia, we have the Mason Guest House, and that's where a lot of the transplant recipients go to recover, because you have to go to the hospital so frequently for checkups those first few weeks. And so my prednisone, of course, had made my cheeks all nice and puffy. So as we got ready to leave the Mason House, my kids were there, and we all stood out in front, and they puffed their cheeks out with air. And I just had my fat cheeks, and that was our leaving the Mason House picture. So we always try to have a good time and stuff. Well, that heart did wonderful for almost 10 years. Year 8, I had one little blockage in the bottom of my heart. And they explained to me that was the beginning of chronic rejection. It's called allograft vasculopathy, and it's an unknown of science. Transplant. They don't know really what causes it. They can treat it for a while, but it keeps getting worse. And the only thing they can do for you when it gets to a certain point is you have to list and get a second transplant. That did not make me happy at all. But we treated it, and we made it for 2 years. And then after that, I'd gotten so bad, the doctor told me it was time to list for a second transplant. I told him no. He looked at me like I was crazy. He gave the look to my husband. They just kind of shook heads knowingly. And when Tony didn't say anything to me on that 3-hour ride home. We got home, he said, we need to talk. He said, who has gotten us through all of it, your illness, your transplant, and now this illness? I said, well, God has, of course. He said, yeah, but did you ask him what his opinion was about this, what his plan was? I said, no, I just know that I'm the lead mentor for Emory. I know everyone in Georgia getting a heart. How can I get a second one before they get a first one? And, I went, I prayed and asked, and I realized that Tony was right, that if I didn't get a transplant, I was going to die. If I listed, there was no guarantee I would get a heart anyway, but at least I would give it a chance. So I had to call Emory and tell him I was sorry. I said no, and that I'd like to be evaluated again. And it's the same. You have to do everything. It's not a gimme just because they know you, just because they've already done surgery. You had to go through the whole process again. And I was okayed, and I got listed again. And they told me to be quick to pack my bags because I didn't have any antibodies built up from my first donor. Well, they didn't know. 17 months I waited for the second heart. I only had waited 6 weeks for the first one. I was put in the hospital, and I spent most of the next 8 months in the hospital after I was admitted. I did get out to go to my oldest daughter's wedding because I told them either they better let me out or I was going to check myself out because I was not missing her wedding. I had waited a long time for that one. The good thing is my baby daughter had been married 5 years, and she came in and told us she was expecting. And so I decided my grandma name was going to be Sugar, Suga. And Tony, I wanted Tony to be Pop, but so we could be Sugar Pop. No, he didn't agree to that. He had to be Grandpa. But little things in the family like that kept giving me hope to keep trying. Don't give up. It was the good things. And I must have gotten 1,000 cards, and we decorated my hospital room with all this stuff. But anyway, after the 17 months, I'd had so many complications, and I'd had a heart attack. I had heart block, nothing like the first time. My kidneys started failing because of the heart disease plus all the medicines I had taken for the 10 years. Just totally different. And I was in the CCU, and my family was getting ready to leave for the day. And Tony was staying with me. And the nurse told the doctors, her family's getting ready to leave. Can I go tell them? And so the nurse came and said, don't leave. We're checking out organs for her tonight. And so we're thinking that she's going to get both because they didn't have to list me for the kidney. It was going to be a bonus. So when they called that they had a heart that matched me, they claimed one of the donor's kidneys. So that way it came from the same donor, and it didn't give me extra antibodies to have to worry about. And so Tony got the kids back, and we waited. And sure enough, it was a go. And I was so toxic that morning. They had tried to start dialysis on me, and it clogged up. And so I had no clue of what was going on. I was reading the newspaper, holding up nothing, just reading it. I had my iPad in my hand, just flicking. And they said, what are you doing? I said, I'm deleting these people that hadn't even checked on me. And it wasn't even open. I don't have any memory. This is what they told me how crazy I was. And so we went down to surgery. And since the first surgery had lasted 4 hours, this surgery was 18 hours long because they had to, get the heart out and all of that. And they had to get the new heart in. And then they let me rest to make sure, still asleep, that the heart was working well. And then they took me back to surgery to do the kidney. That has been almost 13 years since I've gotten that transplant. I just had my checkup yesterday, and every single thing was perfect. So, the nurse wrote me this morning and said, Cheryl, you are still the top one because you are always on the go, and your heart is perfect. Your kidney's perfect. We'll see you in a year. I said, yes, but what got me so was just knowing the people that I had talked with prior to transplant, the hope they gave me. And that's why I wanted to become a mentor with Georgia Transplant Foundation. And then I actually led the mentor project for them for 6 years before I got my second transplant. And we become the faces of hope for those that are waiting. And we have, in every single organ group, we have mentors for the living donors, for the supporters, and for all the recipients. And just when you walk in the room and they're feeling so bad, and you go in looking healthy, and you say, I've had a heart transplant, they perk up. Because just seeing us that you can look healthy again gives them hope that one day they'll be able to have the same. So 4 months after my first transplant, I was invited by one of the guys I talked to here in Augusta before my transplant to come to the LifeLink volunteer meeting. And so my husband and I went, and from the time I walked into this room full of strangers, we were connected because we'd all had transplants. And it was just the most amazing thing to me to hear these people talk about how they share their story and how they reach out to people waiting for transplant. I said, I got to be a part of this. So I became a LifeLink volunteer at 4 months post-transplant. And then I still stayed as, I was working as a mentor and doing all of that. And then we were sitting in clinic, and this guy had a hat on his head, and it had all these pins on it. I said, what is that? He said, the transplant games, the U.S. transplant games at that time. I said, I've never heard of that. What is it? And he said, well, it's held every 2 years, and transplant recipients from all over the United States come together, and it's like the Olympics. I said, I want to do that. So I found out the information, and I met two guys who were twins that both of them had to have a transplant, and they had vests with their pins on. I looked around, there was not another woman that stood out. So I said, I'll get me a vest and get me some pins too. So every team has a state pin that they design. And so when you get to the games, you trade pins with everybody. Well, there was a few that had their own personal pins. I said, I want that too. So I've designed 4 pins now. And so when I get there, if they got a real special pin, I say, I got a special pin too. So I've got all of my pins from all the years from 2004 through 2024. I've got them in shadow boxes, and they're hanging up in my granddaughter's bedroom because I ran out of room in the den. I had to move them. But anyway, so it's just a wonderful thing. I'm actually the manager of Team Georgia now, and we are called the Transplant Games of America because the Kidney Foundation quit being our host in 2010. And then Bill Ryan took over and formed the Transplant Life Foundation. And they not only just host the games, they teach us about living healthy, and they have work at the games. We have workshops. We have an opening ceremony, just like they do at the Olympics. We have a closing ceremony. We have a donor remembrance service while all the donor families come in, and we kind of sit around them and honor their loved ones. We have 22 athletic events, anything, from track and field and swimming and all the hard stuff to stuff like I do now, cornhole and trivia and table tennis. When I first started out, I did the 20K bike ride and won the bronze medal. So I was excited. But now I'm almost 69 years old, and I think it's time to slow down a little bit and have fun. So we actually have a team meeting coming up on the 14th. And, by being involved, you get to meet people from all over the country, plus a couple of international teams come as well. And these are lifelong friends. So you look forward to seeing them. You stay in touch on Facebook. But then as soon as they start arriving, everybody finds each other, and you get your hugs and you get caught up. And it's just one big happy family. And so in 26, we're going to be in Colorado and in Denver. And I'm really excited about that. So I said I get to meet all the Chris Klug group, Chris Klug group, a world record for living donors all in one place. During that, we got to be all of us recipients did it in Salt Lake City in 2016, and our record still holds today of having so many recipients in one place at one time. So we're in the record book. But that's the two local things that I do a lot of is with LifeLink and with the transplant games. But then I volunteer with Georgia Transplant Foundation, as a mentor, and help them at their functions and stuff. I volunteer with them. And then I signed up to be a Donate Life ambassador just because I feel like the more I can honor my donors, the better I am, because I know that their family gave up a son. He was 28 years old. I got to meet my first donor family at 5 years, and he died of a brain aneurysm. When I had written them after my transplant, giving them, thanking them for my gift. And every little while I'd ride them. I got to ride in a Huey helicopter. I climbed Stone Mountain, and just let them know that I was living healthy and that I was honoring him. And so they decided to meet me at 5 years at the LifeLink office. And my daughter, who was 10 when I got my transplant, when she graduated college, she got a job with LifeLink as in the PR department. And when she went for the interview, the lady said, "Now, this is a remote office in Augusta. You don't have any experience. You're straight out of college, and your boss would be in Atlanta. I just don't think this is a good fit since it's a remote office." Tracy looked her in the eye and she said, "Well, I lived with my mom with heart disease for 7.5 years. I saw the bad stuff that heart failure does to you. I've lived with a healthy mama now for 5 years after she got her transplant. What more experience do I need?" They hired her on the spot. Even today, she says, "It's not a job, it's my passion." Now she is the lead PR person, the manager for the whole state of Georgia. Now you tell me that, my little heart failure has affected so many people in positive ways. People quit smoking, people quit drinking, people started going to church. And I have met just hundreds of people because I had a transplant. But anyway, and then after I got involved with the Donate Life, I had got to meet Chris several years ago at the transplant games when he came, and I knew the good things that he had done. And when I found out I could be an ambassador, I said, "Oh, I got to do that too," because I knew we don't hear much about what the things that the foundation does here in Georgia. In the emails I see like goes on in, Colorado and different places, but not here in Georgia. And so when I signed up, my first thing that was supposed to happen was getting supplies to the school kids, like, the pencil holders and all that sort of thing. And I said, "Oh, yes, that would be wonderful." Well, because of we had some bad weather, our school didn't start on time and my packages didn't come on time. And I said, "Oh," so I gave out some of the stuff, and now I've got some stacked up ready for this coming year. And then when the books came out, I said, yes. I called the headmaster. I knew public school wouldn't let me. It would have to be approved by so many different people. But I found the Christian school and I've spoke at that in their chapel and shared my journey and shared more to their 8th grade class, just answering their questions and all. At Edinburgh Academy is the private school, and I've shared to the middle school and the high school and the elementary school in their weekly gatherings before, and got to share my journey. And for the Jump Rope for Heart, I've got to be the one that started the jump off thing. And then the homeschool association, my 10-year-old granddaughter goes to homeschool. And so I talked to the lady who had that. When I took them in, the books in, headmasters just, Cheryl, this is wonderful. They were so excited. And so the headmaster DBA wanted me to come back and read to each of the age groups, especially the little ones, because he said, you'll know how to answer their questions, whereas our teachers wouldn't know how to do that. But it was the first week of May, and school got out the 3rd week of May, and I was leaving town the next week. So he said, well, we'll go ahead and put them in the library and let the teachers, have them this week. But then you got to come the first of the school year next year and read to them and answer questions. I said, I can do that. So we've already got that on the calendar. I have spoke probably at every civic club that we have in probably 100 miles of us. I've gone to Atlanta to speak, but just being able to go and share people about what it means to have a transplant, talk about the different organizations that we have. Most of them are just floored that there's this many people that need transplants. A lot of people don't realize that you can be a living donor. They know about kidneys, but they don't know about livers, And so by sharing, I can get to tell the facts, dispel the myths, share my journey, and then encourage them to register to be donors. And so I love to do that. We had a float in the Christmas parade here last year, and it was so funny. The theme was Christmas around the world. So we made a Christmas tree out of boxes and decorated, and we put a world on top of it. And we said the world needs donors at Christmas. And so we had 2 heart recipients, a 2-time kidney recipient, a kidney pancreas recipient, a living donor for liver, and her recipient. And we got to ride on the float, and we had decorated packages with the different names of the organs on it. So we held our package like it was our gift, and it was the best float in the parade, I might add. But you'd be surprised at the people when we were going down the road hollering, I'm a donor, I'm a donor. And I'd say, okay, who over here is a donor? And they'd raise their hands. It was the guy that was running the parade said it was so good because we had the interaction with the crowd and just didn't go by them. So we hope to do that again. I have a golf cart that's decorated blue and green. My husband had it done for me. And so I get to ride it around when we're camping, and people say, oh, I like your cart. And it's got Donate Life stickers on it. When we camp, I have my American flag flying, and I have the Donate Life flag flying. Then I have my little garden flag with the Donate Life, and then the one for the Donate Life month. And I have all my little blue and green stuffed animals on the dash. So therefore, everywhere we go, people know, you got to take these steps and be bold. And so then I have Donate Life shoes that have Donate Life on it. Then I have some blue and green sequin shoes that I wear. And you'd never hardly ever see me. Most of my wardrobe is blue and green because of the Donate Life colors. And so when I was at Emory yesterday or Tuesday, I had on my Donate Life shirt and my Donate Life sock, and everybody in clinic looked at me and said, where'd you get that shirt? Where'd you get that shirt? And so it opens up conversation. So I always wear heart earrings because you'd be surprised. You're in a store and somebody says, oh, I like your earrings. And I said, well, I wear these because I'm a heart transplant recipient. Oh, really? My sister's waiting on a kidney. And I would never have known that information and be able to share with her if I hadn't been bold. And so that's kind of my word is be bold about sharing your journey, because you never know who's struggling, who's waiting on an organ, who has had a transplant. So it's just, it's a way of life. And even though I've been in the family now for 23 years, it doesn't get old, because I feel like that, with my first donor being 28, my second donor was only 16. That hit me hard because 18 and under is supposed to go to children. Here I was 55, and they told me my donor was 16. And I just, I knew it had to be mine because they told me there was nobody else matched. We had five people was in Emory CCU, and I was the only one. So I know this is my heart and kidney, and that's why they're so good. But still, it really hurt that there wasn't a child. And so I've written his family several times, and I've not heard back from them. But if I lost my 16-year-old son, I don't know that I'd want to know anything about it either. I hope one day they might decide, but it's a personal choice. I've said, thank you for my gifts. And that's what we do for whatever gift we receive, whether it's a birthday or what. And to be given the gift of life is the most precious gift you can get, you know. So my life is quite busy with all my volunteer work. I used to play at the organ at church, and I don't do that anymore. But I do, I do volunteer in the church, and I take my little granddaughter and help in her 4-H class. And so I do have other interests, but my family my family comes first. But they all agree, Mama, whatever you're doing, we're doing it with you. So, my little boy was out there a while ago, and all his little cars he had made were blue and green. And he said, I made those for Donate Life Sugar. I said, well, thank you. I appreciate that. So it's a way of life for us. It's not something that we just do when we get a call saying, hey, we need a speaker. It's a way of life for our whole family, especially with Tracy working at LifeLink. And my other daughter gets to travel a lot with her job. And she is, at first she was very quiet about, especially some of the bad time, like when I had the episode here at home with sudden cardiac. She didn't want to talk about that. But then by the time my second transplant came along, she realized that it was all part of the story. And she had her friends in Atlanta. Of course, they were easier to come visit us at the hospital, and they brought treats. And when we got to the Mason house, it was all her friends bringing us dinners. And so it's, when you have someone that has a chronic illness, regardless of what it is, it's not a single sport. You've got to have that wonderful caregiver, and I have the best one. I would put him up against anybody. We were only married 19 years when I got sick, and we just celebrated 50. And I know that if I hadn't had a good caregiver, I wouldn't have made it through all this, especially having to do it the second time. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I am glad that the Lord has opened doors, that I am getting to meet people all over the U.S. and help in different organizations in whatever way I can. I get a little jealous at all those people out in Denver because they get to do all this fun stuff. But I said, I pray for them, and I hope everything goes well, And so whenever they send me anything to let me know that this is available, I jump right on it because I want to make sure I'm a part and be able to spread the word in the different ways, because every organization does it differently. And, while this way may not reach the person, then you go to swap gears, and this way may be the thing that makes them make the decision to be a donor. And I'm loving life, and everything about my transplant. My creatinine was 0.66 yesterday, and my heart function was 65 to 70%, which is perfect. All my labs were good, and you can't help but smile and just share, and that's what I like to do.